Hello there, and welcome back to the Film Score Podcast. This is your host, Nick, and today my guest is Gareth Coker. Now, it's probably you video game music fans that are going to be most familiar with Gareth, who's scored games like the Ori game series, the Ark game series, and the latest Halo installment, Halo Infinite, among many other games. But Gareth really hasn't had much of a foray into film and TV until now. Having scored the Ark game series, he was, unsurprisingly, tapped to provide the music for the Ark animated series, appearing on Paramount+. So this has allowed him to import some of the themes, palette, styles, etc. from the Ark games, while expanding on the more purely character-driven aspects. So the result is this booming, huge, 3+ hour long score for the first half of the first season. Highly orchestral, highly thematic. It's, I think, a bit refreshing for some of you at least. So, unsurprisingly, Gareth spent a lot of time talking about that, and then taking our classic, or my classic, tangents, discussing, for instance, the score for Shōgun, or what good video game exploration music is like. Like I said, the first half of the series is out now, and you can find out more about Gareth on his social media and his website. You can do the same for me. Now, Season 4 is slowly winding down. Got a few more interviews in me, but until then, sit back and enjoy. Gareth, thank you so much for joining me today. How have you been?
Doing good. A lot happening right now. It's I feel we're only in March, but after a couple of years, I wouldn't say I've been quiet, but there's some big releases that are happening now that have just passed, and I obviously know what I have coming down the pipeline as well. So it's quite an exciting time to be working at the moment, and I'm just grateful to be continuing to get music work, basically.
And I know that there's often NDAs and things like that you can't talk about what's going on in the future, what's coming up. But as we're talking right now, it's the 28th, so the Ark series just released, was it last weekend or a few days ago?
Yep.
And your score release for part 1 comes out tomorrow, so it is right in the middle of all of these things happening. So how do you stay grounded and relaxed during a time like this?
Actually, this is honestly the easiest time because the work is done. One of the things about the animated series that hardly anyone knows, that's been in production since 2020. Maybe even sooner, actually, because we released the first trailer at the Game Awards in 2020, I believe, which means it was worked on before that. And we started recording the animated series in July 2021, which is when most of the world was still on lockdown, certainly couldn't travel, but the director and showrunner and CEO of Ark, Jeremy, he was like, let's do this properly. And we were able to get in a studio, record with a different orchestra layout, and everyone socially distanced, done responsibly. And we were able to record. I couldn't travel, so I was monitoring it remotely from here at 2:00 in the morning due to the time differences. But we were able to get it done, and it was interesting because we were doing it alongside an expansion pack for the game. But it was kind of cool because one of the main antagonists in the animated series, Rockwell, who is played by David Tennant, he's also in that specific expansion pack, which is Ark Genesis 2. And he's definitely the main antagonist in Ark Genesis 2. So it was kind of cool because it was the first time I'd really been able to develop his theme. And at the same time I was developing his theme for the game, they kind of cross-pollinated with the show because he appears in episode 1 of the show. And I was like, man, this is so cool. And, I was like, this is why I was hired to do this, is because I am in the best possible position to cross-pollinate any themes from the game in the TV show. And that is literally what happened. Like, there's so much music from the game. It's not just straight lifts, because it's impossible to do, because the game music doesn't really have to tie to any specific situation. But the animated series, it is scored, like moment to moment, second to second. But I have taken some tracks and just rearranged them so that they fit the picture. And it's been cool reading the comments online that have said, oh, I loved when this track played from the game, and it's like a nostalgia trip because I've been listening to that track in the game since 2015, which is true. And there's other little pockets of tracks, both in this first half of the season and then the second half whenever it drops later this year, that people will recognize tracks from the game on top of all of the new original content that's been developed on the music side. It's a really long-winded way of saying that, like, because we started this such a long time ago and it's been done in tandem alongside the game, it's actually been quite a comfortable process. And I finished writing the music for this last September. That was our last recording. So it's been in the can for me for quite a while. Okay. Often I'm working on the music, especially for games, right until the end. But this has been done for me for a while. And that was just one episode that we did in September. Like, actually the majority of it has been done since last March. So I've actually been sitting on it for quite a while. So mentally, I'm like quite distanced from it. So I get to enjoy the reaction. It has been pretty positive on the show. I think people are very pleasantly surprised that a bunch of game developers went and made an animated series with the help of an amazing animation studio and put this together, and it's actually coherent. We've obviously changed a few things from the game to tell a better story within the show, but it does fundamentally follow the Ark universe rules and lore. And it's just been fun, like, seeing the reaction to the show. And obviously I'm very aware of the reaction to the music, which has been, I would say, universally positive. And I think it's because of the way in which it was written. This is not a show that holds back on the music. I was told to be present with the music all the time. It's not a show where dialogue is happening and the music disappears. Music is there all the time, and there is melody playing against the dialogue, and it can be done if it's done skillfully. I'm very grateful to Jeremy for, like, going with that direction. It's a lot of music, and it's very unlike what a lot of shows are doing right now, where it's just texture and vibe. But this is texture, vibe, and melody, and it's big pretty much all the time. And that was the direction we chose, and I think it worked out really well for the animated series for sure. I feel like I answered like 20 questions there. Sorry. I did tell you I would be good at talking.
The problem is you answered that many, but then you've also planted all these seeds for me to grow all these other questions. But on that last point, it's an interesting comparison point, talking about the amount of melody that's in there, because, like, one of the big shows out right now, Shōgun, the score is much more restrained, and when it's there, it is very textural. And candidly, I have seen a lot of people complain about that, saying, like, "Oh, we've got this big grand scale. Let's have something that's bigger and more melodic." And so I think that approach, and frankly, it shouldn't be a surprise if people are familiar with the games or the music from them or your music broadly, but that approach seems to be kind of refreshing, I think, for a lot of folks, because you don't, like, right now, you're not hearing that as often in film or TV. So I don't know if that's something that you were thinking about, or if it was simply an extension of what you did in the game series.
It's a little bit of both. I mean, the game definitely doesn't hold back in its music approach. I mean, Ark in general is a very over-the-top game. It's dinosaurs, there's sci-fi elements, and you can build armies of dinosaurs. I mean, it's just insane, the things that you can do in the game. And the TV show is an extension of that. And because it's an animation, I've always said this about animation, and I said it about Prince of Persia earlier this year, because of the style, of the look of the game, it allows you to push things further in the music. I think How to Train Your Dragon is a perfect example. That score, which is like one of the finest animation scores ever written, it would absolutely not work if it was live action. It'd be too much sensory overload. But the animation, both because things can stretch in a way and you can exaggerate character facial expressions, whether they're a dragon or a human, because you can exaggerate everything. You have an excuse to exaggerate everything in the music. That's not to say it wouldn't work. You could use the same melodies for How to Train Your Dragon. But the other thing about that score, it's not just the melodies, it's the amount of energy and the number of notes in the music. It just would be so much I think. But maybe they will make a live action How to Train Your Dragon one day and prove me completely wrong.
One is in development right now.
Oh my goodness. I feel like the music approach won't be exactly the same, but we'll find out. And I think that's what I wanted to do with Ark. I think this show, also the pacing of the show doesn't really allow for long, moody scenes to draw out. It's quite quickly paced. Like, scenes never linger too long. I haven't watched all of Shōgun, but one thing that they clearly wanted to do is, and I've lived in Japan, so I know the culture, they clearly wanted to have that feeling of Japanese people take time on everything. And that's both good and bad. I think that allows music to sit for longer. You can't have music be super active in situations like that. So I definitely understand, like, a bunch of people who probably saw the title Shōgun and saw the time period in which it was set and was thinking, we're going to get something that's like a score for an Akira Kurosawa film. And they got completely the opposite. But it's funny, I actually think the score works. Like, inside the show, I think the score works, and there are some really, really cool moments. But I also understand why it's not what people are expecting. In an alternate universe, there is another version of that show with the classic sounding score, which sadly in this universe we'll never get to hear. But I think my conclusion with that, because there's definitely two camps in film and game music. There is the ambient camp, and then there is the melody camp. I fall primarily in the latter, though I'm not beyond doing like super soft and ambient stuff. And I think the thing about the super ambient scores, or when they're textural, when they're really good, they're really good. Like, no one says anything bad about Johan Johansson's Arrival score. There's no melody in that. And it's one of the most iconic science fiction scores of all time, because you can hear 2 seconds of it and you kind of know it's Arrival, especially that vocal track, Heptapod B. Everyone knows what that track is. And it was a real problem when they used it in White Lotus Season 2, because it really took me out of it. I'm like, why is Heptapod B playing when these two idiot men are fighting in an ocean? It was a very bizarre track licensing. So when it's done well, it can be really good. And it's the same thing with melody. You can turn that on its head. When there's too much melody and it's overplayed, it actually takes you out of it. So I guess my argument is really just like, both approaches work. They just got to be done well. And I think the thing about these ambient scores is it's much easier to do them badly. Because it can, I found this cool sound and I'm just going to use this cool sound for another scene. And it doesn't really add anything extra to the scene. My approach, both with games and TV shows, not just to comment on what is happening on the screen. That's the bare minimum requirement. It should be doing something extra. Obviously, you can't do something extra in every scene, especially in action scenes when there's a lot going on. But there are a few action scenes in the animated series where, like, yes, we're scoring the action, but it's like, well, whose theme are we going to play here? Because whose point of view are we taking from this action scene? And that's where you can give the viewer something to latch onto. Whereas if it's just drums and epic chords, it's like, well, this is cool and it's providing energy, but it's not providing me perspective.
And you've mentioned this idea of a sensory overload a few times. You just said melody, there can be too much melody.
Yeah.
In the show, there is a lot of music and a lot of melodic music.
Yep.
So how are you striking the balance of that approach? I mean, your score release is like 3 hours long.
Yeah.
So how are you striking that balance of that approach without it just overwhelming the viewer?
Honestly, it all comes down to the pacing of the animation. And I think they did a really good job, like, pacing out the show for me to work with. And there's such a variety of characters that the key for me was making sure the character themes were not existing in the same registers or same instruments. And that's very obvious in the show. Rockwell's theme is, it's kind of cliche. Rockwell's a villain and his theme always plays in low strings. Always. And that's actually been the case since 2015. Like, his theme could be traced all the way back to 2015. I'm never going to change that. So when, the audience hears that, they're like, oh, Rockwell's on the scene. The Gladiatrix, her theme, hers is the least melodic. Like, hers is one of the few. She doesn't really have a melody. She has a highly identifiable texture, though. It's this descending spiccato string line that just goes up and down an octave. And it just goes back up and down. And it's incredibly sinister. And I was like, well, that's really cool. That's the gladiatrix sound. Because also she's not on screen often enough to justify like a big full-fledged theme. The characters that do get like full-fledged themes are the ones that have the most screen time. That's probably like, I've never actually thought about this question before, and I'm thinking about it now, and it's like, that's actually how I did it. The main characters get like full thematic melodies that get developed throughout the show, and the secondary characters, they have either very short motifs. Scary the Parasaur, who's introduced in episode 1, repeats appearances throughout, and Scary's theme is very short. So I'm just like, well, I can just drop it on whatever I'm doing, and we know Scary's around. It's a dinosaur that can't communicate. It's not doing anything emotional, therefore we don't need to have, anything extra for it. Whereas Mei Yin is a core character. Helena is the main protagonist of the show. Rockwell and Nova are the two primary villains. They have developed themes, and they develop even more in the second half of the show. And John is like a very prominent character. And so that's kind of how I get around it. I think the only difficulty I had was doing John's theme and Alassie's theme, because they're both Native American characters, and I chose to represent both of them with Native American flutes. So I was like, well, how am I going to differentiate them? Because they're also in a similar register. And I just made sure that John's theme was slower and heavier and more stoic. And Alassie's theme, because she's a teenager, it's light and bubbly, and that's her character. That was probably the only difficulty. And because they were all in different registers, and because they're all on screen at different times of the show, it's rare that they're all on screen together. But if they're all on screen together, then I have like a here they all are together theme, rather than like focusing on the individuals. So it really is dictated to me by what's happening on screen. It's a very fine balance between overloading on the melody, but I think the decision to put them in different registers and different instruments means that the ear is never tiring.
I see. And that makes sense. And on that same idea of themes, you had mentioned like Rockwell's theme, you can trace that back to 2015. At the same time, while you were writing the music for the series, you're also doing the music for Arc Genesis Part 2, which features Rockwell. So for the character themes, how much of that is pulled, not to say directly from the games, but largely so, and how much of that is you also going, well, this is a different medium, different situations, I need to change things?
So fortunately, the characters in the game, so it's a bit of a backstory on Arc. Arc was initially an early access game in 2015 and then got its full release in 2017. And in the original version of the game in 2015, these characters didn't exist. So they've been added to the game over time because Arc is a living game. And the lore has gradually been inserted into the game via what we call Explorer's Notes, which are discoverable items in the game. So the characters are based on those Explorer's Notes. And so they've never really had musical themes in the game. So actually, this is the first time that Helen has had a proper theme. It's the first time that Mei Yin's had a proper theme. Now, what the themes that we do use from the game, obviously the main title theme, and that gets a variation right from the very first note of the series. Like, I was like, oh, what would Arc sound like if it was played super softly? And what's the softest flute I can think of? Bansuri. And that flute version of the main theme, which plays in the opening and also plays in the very first trailer we did, it vaguely outlines the Arc melody, but it's not fully formed yet. You might hear the fully formed version later on in the show. I don't think that's really a spoiler. I think our fans will expect to hear it at some point. Yeah, I was like, man, this is so cool, because it's like I finally get to do the soft version of that theme, which has only been played at maximum volume for like almost a decade. So there's the main theme, and then the things that did transfer over are any like major combat cues. Like the first one that I can talk about is the Broodmother. That's a very iconic fight from the game. That I think was in there in early access. If it wasn't, then it got added very soon after it came out, like maybe 2016 or something like that. That's been in there for a long time. And to rework that scene and do it in the second episode, I was like, man, this is so cool. And getting it to match the visuals. So Broodmother came over. So it's mostly the combat tracks that did come over. And that was something I was very conscious of, because they've been in the game for a long time. But the character tracks, it's only really Rockwell that's had something fully developed. So it actually gave me enough room to like both combine the old stuff with the fight music, like the music that's I don't know if you know this, but people have played Ark for tens of thousands of hours. Like it's such a popular game. It doesn't surprise me. It's a massive game and it's a popular game. So people have been listening to these tracks for years, over and over. And I wouldn't blame them if they turn the music off at this point. But I don't think many people do, because there's also like an indicator in the game as like you're in danger. So I was very mindful of the fact that people would probably want to hear these tracks again in the show, but obviously in a slightly different form because it has to fit the visuals of the show. And in the first episode in particular, one of the combat tracks is literally one of the first tracks that you hear as combat in the game as well. So it is kind of reflecting and replicating the experience that any first-time player of Ark had when they woke up on the island. The first episode kind of musically matches that just a little bit.
Interesting.
But yeah, the character themes pretty much all new, other than Rockwell. His was defined. Rockwell's theme, I was doing Genesis 2. I think I finished the work on Genesis 2, the composition work on Genesis 2 a little bit before I did the pilot for the show. And I was like, whatever happens, I have Rockwell's theme. And that's something I can like start to weave into the show. And like, it gave me a little bit of a pillar to work around. It's no secret that Rockwell's an important character, both in the game and the show. So I was like, that one needs to be super recognizable. And it's very simple, but it's a theme that gets really developed both in the first half, but way more in the second half as well. So, man, there's so much I want to say, but I can't. You have to come back when we drop the second set of episodes. But as a final like answer to your question, it's between the existing content and the new content that was generated by the TV show. I didn't really have any problems mixing and matching, and I didn't have any creative blocks because there was enough new material to work with. And I'll just be honest, I think what I was given to work with in terms of the animation and the voice acting was really good. And it's very easy to work with something that inspires you.
I'm sure. There is one other thing I want to talk about with themes, but I'm going to take us on a quick detour. You mentioned throwaway comment of I wouldn't be surprised if people mute the game at some point. And I wish I could show you my laptop is literally from 2015, so I haven't been able to play any new games for a very long time. But the last one I put too many hours into was Dota 2, and that was a game that it didn't take long for me to just mute the music as well. As the composer putting so much time into making the music for a game, does it ever bother you knowing that there's going to be some amount of people that, I mean, maybe from minute 1 or minute 6,000 are going to mute what's there?
I think if you're doing it from minute 1, then you're missing out for sure. Like, but I don't think many people turn it off from minute 1. If they are, then it's probably because they have grown up doing mobile games, or they're just not used to the experience. And I feel like that's just a phase in people's lives. Like when they, maybe you're doing that in your early teenage years or late teenage years, and then you get to mid-20s and you want to experience media in a different way. But I'm never, especially in a multiplayer game where you're spending hours and hours and hours doing the same thing, I'm never going to judge anyone. We have these sliders in the game for a reason.
Yeah.
Now, single-player games with a clear, defined narrative and a start, middle, and end, if you're turning off the music, like, frankly, I don't think people should be given volume controls for that. I think, like, we make an experience that has been tailored and crafted and designed to be experienced a certain way, much like a film or a TV show. And I know people want to customize their games to be personal. I think it just greatly depends on the game. Like if it's such a like, no one's going into The Last of Us and tweaking the volume controls, right? Like no one's going to God of War and tweaking the volume controls. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I hope no one's going into Ori and tweaking the volume controls, or if they are, like turning up the music louder, if anything. But I think it greatly depends on the type of game. But there's only so much music that can be created. I mean, like think of the people that played World of Warcraft. Blizzard have produced like tons of music over the years, hours and hours and hours, and it's all impeccably produced. But at the end of the day, there's only so much they can produce to accommodate all of the gameplay scenarios. But that's where I think most people, when they're playing multiplayer games especially, they want the music to capture the vibe of the game, because then it's like a comforting thing, like, oh, I'm playing World of Warcraft now, and it's that sound. It might be a melody that they've heard, or it might just be the overall production quality or the sound of the orchestra. It's more like a feeling. And I think that's what, when people fire up Ark, they have the main theme blasted in their face like every time, and it's became kind of a meme about how loud it was. But we've never really shied away from that. And I think people kind of like it because it's so unique to Ark. Like most main menu themes now, like they're not that in your face. They're quite ambient now, a lot of the main menu themes, and I always feel that's a missed opportunity personally. But yeah, Art kind of hits you in the face, and then the game's music kind of hits you in the face as well. And it's just kind of a character of the game. Genshin Impact is another good example. Like, that music has a very distinct identity. There's a lot of melody in that, and there's lots of like cool little themes. But overall, the production style of that soundtrack, it's very recognizable too. And I think it's comforting for some people that to just have that specific sound in the background. And some people like that. Because here's the thing, when it becomes background music, it means you're not paying as much attention to it. And that's why people switch out the music. It's not that they don't like the music, but perhaps they just want to listen to something else. And I think that's okay. But I do feel like people should at least give the music a chance when they start. I mean, I feel like probably 99% of people do. So as the old saying goes, you cannot please everyone all of the time. But if you're pleasing like 90% or more, you're probably in a good spot. So
yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. And frankly, if you were doing something that pleased everyone, there's an issue with your audience. I mean, that would just be boring.
It is impossible to. I mean, I've read comments on Ori, like, which is, you know, a pretty critically acclaimed soundtrack, and I remember reading comments. I was like, there was one that really stuck out to me, and it was, I don't like the soundtrack. It's this new age hippie, like ethereal nonsense. And I was like, can't please everyone. You know, maybe I question that person's taste, but whatever. It's, you know, it's fine. It's okay. The problems happen for a composer when you're not pleasing everyone, and well, then you don't get hired again. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm never too worried about that.
For Ori, if you have those types of issues, that it might not be the game for you, because one of the things that you're doing is like bringing life to this forest, and that's quite a hippie approach.
Well, exactly, yeah. And it's the approach that composers take for games is it's rare that it's like the composer only. It's always done on a team level, and in the case of Ark, it's really just me and the showrunner Jeremy. But on Ori, it was like I was left to my own devices, but like if I was doing something wrong, like it'd have been pointed out to me. So
yeah.
You know, these decisions are come to after a long period of time. So yeah, you know, if people don't like them, that's fine. Like that's what art is. If everyone liked everything, the world would be an incredibly boring place. So
absolutely. But on that note, and I think part of this comes from the amount of time that players spend with a lot of games.
Yeah.
You go on your Spotify and you look at some of the Ori tracks, for instance, and just have tens of millions of listens apiece. And I think it's something that a lot of video game players have a closer connection to the music of games than people watching movies, TV shows.
Yeah.
So as the composer, does that ever place more of a pressure on you, knowing there's the video game VGM fandom is, I think, much, in many ways,
they're very active,
bigger and louder. Yes, exactly.
Yes. I get what you're asking, but actually I don't feel pressure from it. My job is simply to write the best music for the game, and if it works within the game, people will listen to it outside of the game. It's just what happens. My job is to make sure that the synergy between the music and the visuals and the gameplay sequences, it feels connected. Because if it feels connected, then that feeling is going to transmit to the player, and they're going to want to relive that. Now, obviously, if it's a big crazy action sequence, that's not the kind of music people really listen to outside of games, although there are plenty of exceptions. But a lot of game music is exploration, and it's also game music is subtly trying to push you forward all of the time. It's trying to get your brain into a flow state. And that flow state is why people listen to it over and over and over and over and over again. It's why all of my music is on study playlists, like everywhere. That's actually what's pushing up the play count. Is the place? It's not actually gaming playlists. It's study playlists and coding playlists, because that kind of exploration music that is really well constructed, and it's got a melodic hook, but it's not got melody all the time. If you listen to most of my game music, there is a melody section and then a non-melody section, and a melody section and a non-melody section. If it was melody all the time, it would not be good focus music, because your brain doesn't get a chance to rest. But your brain also needs something to tickle its, like, the whatever happens when you're hear an interesting melodic idea, it needs something to keep you engaged. So it's always my exploration tracks. So there's oscillation between melody and non-melody, or to put it another way, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. And I've definitely spoken about song form before in other interviews and how I think it's by far the best format for game music. And that allows the brain to kind of like get into a flow state. We've all played games and you just become like at one with the television, at one with the controller. That is a feeling that people want to replicate outside of the game when they're doing their other tasks. And game music just happens to be particularly well suited to that. So I never really am thinking about the pressure, because I think first of all, my approach and what I've just talked to you about, it's going to happen anyway. That has been and always will be my approach to game music anyway. I am constantly trying to subtly push the player forward. It's not like music tells you go here. It's just like, if you listen to a lot of my music, there's gentle pulsing, ostinatos, just like very simple repeated patterns. And that subconsciously, in my opinion, helps push the player forward. It's not ambient drone music. Ambient drone music tells you to stand still. And that's why I have a problem with it. Like in exploration games, it's like, you're not encouraging me to explore with the music. Like, just give me something. One of my favorite scores of all time is Jesper Kyd's score for Assassin's Creed 2. And yeah, the battle music is all amazing. Main theme is amazing, but actually it's the explore music. It's this gentle pulsing all the time as you're exploring the environment, and particularly when you're in stealth. It's encouraging you not to stay still, because if you stay still and you're in stealth, you're probably going to get caught. So it's this very, very subtle way. The convention might be, oh, it's stealth, you need to hide, like therefore the music needs to be static. Well, actually, no. Stealth, you actually need to move, but it's this fine line between tension, having the music be super quiet and tense, but also telling you to move forward. That's a game that came out, more than a decade ago, like 12, 13, I don't know when it came out. It's a long time.
Yeah.
But it really struck me at the time how effective it was. I think there's a really long track on the soundtrack. It's like 9 or 10 minutes long, and it's just the Explore Suite from like start to finish. It's one of my favorite things to listen to, because it's a masterclass in how to do tension music that isn't boring. It's not just like, here is a tense pad and a tense drone. It's constantly like, but in a really subtle way, pushing you forward. And by the way, it matches the visuals perfectly and the setting with all the instruments and everything else. So all of these things I'm thinking about, and it's all dictated to me by the gameplay. And I think if you get that right, people just will listen to the soundtrack. That's just what's going to happen. Obviously, you need a game that gives you the space and freedom to explore. If it's a highly scripted, like short horror game, you're not going to be able to do that. But in a lot of these games that are quite big and large and open worldy, the exploration music is by far the most important thing. And you need to find subtle ways to push the player through the environment.
I find that really fascinating. And now, while you're talking about it, it makes complete sense and seems so obvious, and yet is something I've never thought about or read or heard.
Well, if it's done well, you won't notice it.
Yeah. But the thing that I find extra interesting about that is, I've seen a lot of film and TV composers kind of get annoyed at the idea of people using their scores as like background music. And yet it seems like for things like Explore Cues, Explore Suites, when they end up on some of these playlists, it's almost an affirmation of what you were trying to accomplish, because it's pushing the listener to go forward when they're coding or writing or doing whatever else instead.
Exactly. I feel like if you end up on one of those playlists, you did your job, like, frankly, because there's a very common like sound to all of those. If you actually go through any of the playlists, you'll start to notice the things that I've talked about. You'll start to notice them in all of the other cues as well. Guaranteed. I don't even know what's on the other cues on the playlist. I just know that like those characteristics that I just talked about, they'll probably be present in some shape or form in most of the tracks.
Fascinating. All right, I kind of want to dig into that now.
I'm saying that with such confidence, despite having not a clue what's on any of these playlists, but I think I'm probably pretty close.
With that, because like that aspect obviously is drawing a point of distinction between music for particular types of games and music for film and TV.
Yep.
You've done shorts before, you've done series episodes, but this is like the first full series you've scored, I believe. So
yes.
What were the challenges of moving from one medium to the other?
Honestly, I think just the amount of work. Like, I mean, games are a lot of work too, but like the thing about games is you're not really tied to the picture. And this was just like 7 hours of being so closely tied to the picture. Like in games, we're rarely doing a cutscene longer than 5 minutes or 6 minutes. This is like, I mean, the episodes, as you've noted, like it's constant music. It's rare that we have silence. It's an event when we use silence. And how to get all of the cues to flow and weave, like you could basically play every episode and turn off the visuals and it would play like a symphonic movement, like a constant thing. Like most of the cues transition seamlessly from one to another because it is basically wall-to-wall music. Episodes 12 and 13 is 12 actually, which hasn't aired yet, is pretty much start to finish all music. You could play it from start to finish. And actually, Jeremy has said, like repeatedly, he was like, I want this show to feel like an opera. And that's hence the heavy emphasis on themes. And again, I can't say too much, but if you like the music in the first half, the power that it has in the second half is because of everything that is set up in the first half. I also think that's a result of everyone on the show becoming more comfortable with making the show. Also, once we reached the halfway point, we were out of the pandemic, and I do think that's just a natural morale boost as well. It was difficult making this thing during the pandemic. It's just like everyone was going through difficulty. I think it was harder to make games as well because we're all just stuck at home. I think we've noticed recently as well, just in the general film, TV, and game world, that like now that we're out of the pandemic, the quality of things seems to be rising quite rapidly. And I think that's just a natural result of, not being in the pandemic anymore. Back to your question, the working on the TV stuff, like in terms of like it being linear content, not really a problem because I've handled that in games. It's just a longer version of that. The amount of work was a bit of a shock because with games, it's normally spread out over quite a long period of time. Whereas this is like, I had little bursts where I'd be focused on an episode for like a month and then off for a couple of months. But like, I couldn't do anything else like while I was working on the episodes. Like this was a slow, laborious process. What I learned is that I would have to adapt my process quite significantly if I was doing like an episode a week. Thank goodness we weren't doing an episode a week. I don't think it would be possible to deliver music of this level of craft. I'd have had to dumb down the music significantly because all of the melodic content is so deeply woven into each scene, and like the timing of everything, you can't rush that. Like you just can't. And then, by the way, it's got to be fully orchestrated and recorded and all of that. And that part actually happened. Like we got so good at that by the end. Eric Buchholz and David Peacock, my two orchestrators on the project, they orchestrated every single note of the animated series. And I added up the score pages actually a couple of days ago. It's 1,200 pages of score. Wow. Like it's a massive book. It's up to 80 musicians in this orchestra. And that's just a lot of notes. By the end of the process, we were able to orchestrate an episode in a day. At the beginning, it took a lot longer because they needed to learn the style as well. But by the end, it was like, yeah, sure. I was like, man, I'm struggling. I've got to get everything approved in time for the recording. And they're like, it's fine. We'll get it done in a day and a half. And it was nice having them because it meant once I'd finished the composing, I could be divorced from the like process for a little bit. And then I could proofread everything that they'd done. I don't mind orchestrating, but the physical aspect of it just it just takes it out of me. But when I have someone else doing that for me and they did such a great job, it meant I could like just take a deep breath and look at it like from a different like viewpoint and just look at all the notes on the page and be like, yep, that's how it's supposed to sound. Because obviously I wrote it all. I know how it's supposed to look on the page, and anything that isn't quite right, I could like, it immediately stands out to me. Okay. But it was just nice to be able to like not do the actual like note by note orchestration process and actually just look at it as a whole and be like, yep, that's going to work. But yeah, they did an unbelievable job. I think now I feel ready to do like anything because I was able to speed up and adapt my process. But the pilot, the first episode, I mean, it took me like 2.5 months to school the whole thing. That's just too long. But with Arc, they gave me the time. And so if they'd given me less time, I'd have probably figured it out, but they gave me the time to develop those themes, because in the pilot, like, we have Helena's theme right from the beginning. We have Victoria's theme right from the beginning. Nerva's theme's got to be presented. Thank goodness we don't present Mei Yin's theme until the second episode, because then it's just like, but a lot of themes had to be established in the first few episodes, and you can't rush that. I mean, you can, but you're running a risk of not getting potentially the best result. So it's not to say that I couldn't do things quickly if I had to, because I've definitely proven in my career that I've been able to work to a very tight deadline. But I do think when you let composers, let composers cook and give them cooking time, they can come up with much better results. And I think that's been proven by literally any major film or TV show. It does happen every so often where a rush job happens and there's a really like iconic score, but that happens like 1 times out of 100. Whereas I think the percentage is far higher where when the composer was given time, a great score is born.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I could start like naming examples of the iconic rush jobs because like those are ones that you know.
Yeah.
But throughout this and seeing some of your comments online, it seems very clear that you had a good relationship with the showrunners, the studio, everyone involved, and I've seen them giving a lot of support on the score.
Yep.
In the opening credits, it goes like cast Russell Crowe and then you.
Yep.
So there's obviously they understand the importance of it. And so I saw you mention, and I can't remember where, that the world of Ark is very easy to live in as a composer. And so I assume that is like the literal world itself, but it also sounds like everyone else involved in that world as well. But I was wondering, as we wrap up, if you could kind of expand on what you mean by that.
I actually meant like the actual game world itself, because the canvas is so big. But actually, you've actually made it sound even nicer, because it is true. Everyone on the Arc team, like at least in terms of my experience with them, has been super helpful in enabling me to put me in the best position to do. I have no excuses for not delivering a good score. Like, they should fire me if I didn't deliver a good score. Thankfully they haven't. I've been working with them for almost a decade now, because they've given me literally everything I could possibly ask for. So I have no excuses. Like, they should expect a great score because they gave me everything I needed, and that is my job. And if I'm not doing my job, I should be removed from the project. But I am doing my job because they give me everything. So, but it goes beyond that, because they're very thankful, they're grateful, they're super supportive. Like, it's not just a relationship. Gareth produced music and then goodbye. This is a personal relationships that have developed over years, and it's no secret that Ark's like, it's got a mixed record. It's like the game's not been perfect the whole time. There are a lot of bugs in the game. It's kind of a meme as well, like how many bugs there are in the game. But at the end of the day, it has a massive player base, and it has a massive player base for a reason. And it's kind of cool we've literally created from scratch an IP that has grossed over $1 billion, and has touched a lot of people's lives. And I think the coolest part is that it's provided a community for a lot of gamers to spend a lot of time together in. And I don't think that can ever be underestimated, like how hard it is to do that. The fact is that there are not that many huge online game communities, especially in a game that is paid. It's one thing to do that when your game is free, like Fortnite, but I think it's another thing entirely when you have an entry price to your game, which is why what World of Warcraft has done over the years is so remarkable, because you always have to pay for that game, and I think you have to pay a monthly subscription as well on top of that. So I think what they've done with Ark has been pretty amazing. And because I've gotten to record at Abbey Road, I don't even know how many times I've recorded at Abbey Road anymore. It doesn't matter. Because if I ask to record there again, they'll just say yes, because they also now know truly the value of live recorded music. The best quote I got, like, during development of the show is, like, I think it was after the pilot and after Arc Genesis 2, Jeremy was like, yeah, I'm never going back to non-live recorded music again. It's like he now understands, like, what it can add, and especially with the kind of forces that we're using. Like, that brass section, you can't get anywhere else. It's just not available anywhere else. I think there's only one place in the world where the brass sounds like that, and it's in London, and it's in that studio, because that studio has a very good acoustic for that level of brass. Yeah, if we want the Arc sound, that's just where it's going to have to come from. It's funny because I've been doing some stuff for the game recently. I've been going back to samples, and it's just like, working digitally, knowing what it can and will be is it's not frustrating, because it all gets recorded eventually, but it's just like, wow, it's like the drop off is quite major. So yeah, they've been a pleasure to work for. I obviously know what's coming down the pipe, and there'll be Arc music for a good while yet.
Awesome. And candidly, it's so great to hear that from you, and like I said, seeing it just generally online. It would be a much nicer world in film, TV, and games if everyone appreciated the music and the composers that much.
I will admit, like they have done a really nice job of like pushing the music out there, but it is, I think it's a byproduct of the music being an important part of the show, and that was the plan initially. It's not like a sudden, oh, we've got to thank Gareth. It's actually it was the plan for music to be front and center for right from the beginning. I mean, I've been very lucky in my career to like work on a game series, Ori, where music is front and center for the whole time, and then now have this, like, my debut in television is a show which has like music front and center the whole time. It's incredibly lucky. That's why I mentioned it was a great world to live in, because there's just so much variety of content for the game. It's music for dinosaurs, it's music for science fiction, it's music for ancient China, it's music for a fantasy element, it's music for characters. Like, all of these different elements in one score. Yes, please. What composer is going to say no to that?
I love it. And I think, on a note like that, great place to wrap up. So,
okay, cool.
Gareth, once again, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure to talk to you, to watch the show, and to dig into your very massive score.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.